thank you for obviously joining us and dropping some knowledge on this whole idea of personalization at scale. And so, Will, first we'll start with you and talk about like why this whole kind of topic of personalization even matters, right? I think,
Yeah.
we often have the tendency to get into, I don't know, solutioning, right? Before we even talk about the problem or I guess even the outcome that we're looking to drive. So tell us first, like, why does personalization matter? Where can it help? Where can it
Yeah.
not? Why is it a big deal?
Yeah. The reason this conversation matters is everyone here has their own inbox, right? And they get all of these messages that come in on a day in, day out basis. The reality is like we've honed our mental spam filters to a degree that frankly AI can't even keep up with. And so when we look at the data though, there's this inclination of particularly with RevOps to want to simplify it down to a math equation of volume times conversion equals results, which is very much good funnel metrics. But the reality is we often don't recognize the impact that we can have to that conversion rate by making some fundamental changes to how we go about doing prospecting and enabling and teaching our sellers. So the data across Lavender's data set, so Lavender sits in tens of thousands of inboxes on a daily basis. We see billions of sales emails. Yeah, I literally pulled this data last night over the last 3 month period. It's 10x more responses when you actually take the time to write a manual message compared to sending something that is automated. Which, I mean, Victoria, your team has seen some pretty dramatic improvements to response rate when you're looking at personalizing compared to more automated templates. What's your team seeing?
Yeah, ever since we implemented Lavender, we've seen like a 15% increase in responses, opens, and engagement. Like I always say, the SDR game is not the same when I was an SDR. Like I was spraying and praying. I was sending out mass sequences, probably would not teach my SDRs that today. But since things are getting so much more focused, like people have no time to read emails that are long-winded. I have some SDRs who send pictures of, let's say, Will, you had a husky. I have an SDR on the team who sent a picture of her husky and got engagement through that. So just getting creative and being different and standing out from the noise has definitely increased our engagement, our response rates, and so forth.
The other data point, Matt, if you want to go to the next slide, I was on a call with the professional services group over at SalesLoft. Victoria, to your point on the game being different, I believe it was like 2021-ish. There was this data point going around from SalesLoft where you want to customize your template about 20%. That is no longer the case. It's now 50% of your template needs to be getting customized in order to see these benefits. And so when you think about like how much of what you're putting in front of these sellers needs to be adjusted in order to see these fundamental shifts, there has to be some sort of change in how we go about doing what we do in order to drive that number consistently and effectively.
Yeah. Maybe a question for both of you on this because one, we're talking about personalization, some of the outcomes that it can drive, but then there's a natural tension between personalization and sending automated messages gives you the ability to call it land or maybe potentially land in more inboxes versus personalization will obviously take more time. You're not still the same 24 hours in a day. It could mean like fewer opportunities, fewer at bats, but maybe you're increasing your at bats. So like, how should people like one way the trade-offs there? And then I know we're going to get into some actual examples of what like personalization looks like, but you brought it up here, Will, of adjusting the template that you might have, or maybe adjusting your sequences that you might have. I can think of things where it's okay, I'll adjust for certain variables of like where they went to school or college or things like that versus what Victoria mentioned of, hey, I know that you have a husky and you're into huskies, or if you're Andy Mowat, he's like super into Keanu Reeves. So like you send him like a Keanu gif or something, right? He's going to get back to you. I'm guessing if someone sends Will a picture of like their husky, you're probably going to respond to that, right? So those could both be called like personalization, but maybe different levels of personalization. So any general frameworks or things that people can apply there that could potentially help them think about what that means?
Yeah, one thing, and you brought that up because when you mentioned college, like there's a difference between being personalized and being relevant, right? So if I'm just sending something out that's based off someone's LinkedIn, hey, Saul, you're the co-founder of Lavender and you went to XYZ school, like trash, I would delete that, right? But if it's more enticing, or if I look at your posts and see what you've liked or commented on, or like really took the time to research based on not just like your account, but on contact specifically, that's going to bring you a lot further than if I were to just reading off like your LinkedIn. So something I just wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I categorize the like buckets of things that can be used to personalize into three categories. There's like personal personalization. Typically, personal personalization is not going to necessarily be relevant, but it can add like a nice flair. Like you can use it to say create like a PS. PS included a picture of my husky because saw you had one. Yeah, dog lover to dog lover wanted to reach out. The like other layer is like company information. So this is where you get like trigger events, things like you're hiring, etc. Oh, actually, before I go to company level, on the personal front, one that's totally underutilized would be like past job experience, because that's going to shape how they approach whatever the job is to be done. So you can actually pull a lot of relevance from some personal nuggets, things like past job experience. I just find a lot of sellers tend to struggle with that one and thinking about how to contextualize it because they typically haven't done that job before. The company level is where I get into things like hiring, what the product is that they actually sell. So if I'm a Liveperson, I create a awesome experience for Delta Airlines. Yeah, thinking about how I reach out to another airline, like I want to talk about what that company actually does. And that might seem obvious when you're blasting templates that just talk about yourself. The reality is like just flipping that framing to talk about what they do and what they're building can be really advantageous. And the third tier that a lot of folks don't always think about would be market level personalization. Gmail changing their approach to open tracking, which for the RevOps people in here, Gmail is now blocking open tracking by default. And so your measurements will likely change pretty much overnight. So the question then is that something that I can use to personalize my outbound? It's more relevance than it is personalization as you go away from the individual person, but it's still context that matters to this person's day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, maybe let's apply that to a couple of examples. And so I don't know, maybe I'll start with you because it sounds like this was I guess the question's up here, right? Like, is this personalized? And it's an email to Victoria. And so I don't know, maybe I don't know who should go first, Will or Victoria, but maybe Victoria can. Is this one of those things where you're like, nope, delete, trash, throw this thing in the garbage can? In which case, Will's got a better job, or what?
My eyes are burning.
So probably good to set the stage on some of these emails. So
Probably.
in our hiring process, we ask folks to draft an email as though they are reaching out to Liveperson. And so we've got a few examples here to showcase how folks have personalized these emails. And the beautiful part about this is I have Victoria here to review them live with y'all. So Victoria, this person didn't get an interview, needless to say, but I can probably liken that up to the fact that they definitely didn't use Lavender when writing the email.
Yeah.
What's your thought?
I don't know. It's giving ChatGPT. Like you just like uploaded my LinkedIn into ChatGPT and said, please write up an email. I will say this person seems really excited and happy. I would say the tone seems engaging, but it's just very long. It's again, spitting out information that I can find on myself and LinkedIn. The sales team is one of the only departments that bring money into the company as opposed to being an you know what I'm saying? That's just like running. That's a run-on sentence. I hope
it's giving ChatGPT.
I hope the person who wrote this isn't on the email. I mean, on the webinar. That would be.
I hope they are. They need this.
All right, Will, savage.
All right. Tell us, Will. So obviously, what are some of the things that are wrong with this?
I want to call out some of the things that are technically personalization before I go into the challenges that this email has, because there's a few key things, right? One is they mentioned how long you've worked at Liveperson.
Yeah.
They've nudged the fact that you have a director title. They mentioned a key customer, and they mentioned an announcement around being an innovative company. Technically, they use four different things to personalize this email, and yet we're still like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
And so it brings up this question of what is personalization these days? What makes for an effective email? Even if you personalize with four different things, it still doesn't mean A, it's relevant, or B, it's any good. And so this notion of just telling your sales team personalize, right? Or giving ChatGPT, throw it into an AI system. Here's the LinkedIn profile and have at it. This is the output that we tend to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess like you said, so personalized does not necessarily mean better is one of my main takeaways. Because like you mentioned, there are technically four elements of this that are personalized, but it does not mean that this is good quality, effective outreach. And so maybe I guess we've got a slide after this, I think, with maybe a different take on this. So I don't know, Victoria, how do you feel about this one?
I think this one is good. I think it's really short to the point. Like something that I really have learned over the years is like email someone as if you're texting them, right? Like it just makes it so much easier and simplifies it. The only thing I would add to this, I probably should have told you this before we dove into it, is maybe
Yeah.
just close off the email, right? Lavender AI helped Clary sellers double their reply rate through data-driven email coaching. Maybe close it off like open to seeing it or something like that. Like I would probably close it because it seems like it's just ended right then and there.
Oh, and by the way, I did not edit these. I literally just threw them in. So the point on closing it out, the way I might want to approach that, just like thinking about, I guess it would depend on your own personal best practice data, but I know with mine, it would actually tell me to write fewer questions. So maybe instead of would it be helpful, I might make that into more like a sentence structure. What we find is like asking multiple questions ends up reducing response rate by 26% overall across the data set. It's like a weird, as soon as I ask people two questions, they just like,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Does not
I'll ask.
compute. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like I'm a simple human, please just one question at a time.
Yeah. I liken it to the classic couple question of like, where do you want to go for dinner tonight?
Yeah.
You ended things with that, like asking like where do you want to go for dinner tonight at like the end of an email like that?
No, I think of it in the sense of the types of questions that would be really wild. Where do you want to go for dinner today?
I
But
would
the question requires you to think and doesn't give a lot of direction. And so I see a lot of sellers ask, "Hey, how are you coaching email today?" And that's such an open-ended, broad spectrum question that you end up losing a lot of people from answering the question. It's the same mentality behind asking multiple questions is do I answer this one or that one? Because, and you don't consciously think about this, but because you're splitting their attention between two questions, they're less likely to answer any of the questions
yeah.
until they've opted into the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Victoria, though, like, what do you think about because like we went from using four like angles of personalization in the first one to this one's literally just one, which is like, I see you're hiring.
I don't mind it, to be honest. Again, it's like very short and to the point. I think maybe this would be better as like a LinkedIn message as opposed to an email. Maybe in the email you can say, "Hey, Victoria, shot you over a LinkedIn message, saw that you're hiring." Maybe elaborate more on that. And then PS, something like, I don't know if I've posted anything specifically. Something maybe like huddle up. PS, just watch the latest episode of Huddle Up. I loved what you mentioned in XYZ. Looking forward to more episodes dropping, something like that.
Which like my systems brain is okay. So you've got like a company angle here that's more potent than a personal angle. And you could have much more impact with just one and better writing style than you can with four. But you could level it up even more by layering it with another personal aspect of personalization. So if you had, because hiring is so impactful, you can actually level it up with a personal piece within that message as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think less is more, right? It's finding use the word potent will, right? Like finding the thing or things that are going to have that big impact.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And actually, so we showed a couple of elements of what personalization means. This is taking us back a little bit. But one other question is, so we think about emails like this and this notion of personalization over the course of a sequence or a variety of touch points. And so
Mhm.
one element that we've been talking a lot about is how to personalize individual messages and how much of each message should be personalized, right? We saw the sales loft stat before, 20 versus 50%. How should folks be thinking about personalization though across this entire like sequence or number of touch points and mixing in the manual with the automated sort of steps in order to collectively produce the best outcomes, if you will?
So the data would tell you that there's two types of follow-up emails, at least two types that perform well. There's like a simple bump, which when I think about a bump email, you can reuse that original personalization element. Those bumps tend to be shorter. Now, I don't suggest people just say, yeah, Victoria, any thoughts? Question mark. That's not what I'm suggesting here. It's more, Victoria, given the hiring, wasn't sure if you had given my note any thought? Question mark. A little bit more thoughtful than any thoughts. The flip side of that, what we see are these like much longer follow-up emails that also tend to perform well, not as well as the bumps, but they tend to perform well. And that is where you can start to layer in new potential personalization elements. The first, the bump aspect, it's a fairly automatable email, assuming you can take that variable or that element ahead of time and put it into the follow-up. You're getting at what I'm getting at with this, looking at the comment, needing to explain and go a little bit deeper. I refer to it as bumps and expansions. And so the expansions are where you're going to expand your thinking. One of my favorite frameworks for this is a clarification email, where I'm clarifying some of the aspects of what we do and how it fits into the pieces of relevant personalization that have been added in, like hiring, and getting into the weeds a little bit of like exactly where it plays. So those would be like the two like key pieces. I'm personally in follow-up a fan of continuing that personal touch, because Victoria, do you have a list running in the back of your head of who's cold emailed you today?
If you're being targeted, you will. If you're just, you know what I'm saying? If
Yeah.
you're, and I don't mean to sound like rude in that, but I'm just thinking about like the way that I tell my SDRs is have that running list of people that you're talking to or people that like you really want to get in touch with. So those are like your green level contacts. And then like ones who are yellow, no, to answer your question. Like I probably am not thinking about that, but super personalized people for sure.
Yeah. And the way I think about like personalization and follow-ups is the majority of like emails in your inbox, my inbox, like I'm not thinking about in my day-to-day. And so I almost have to treat the follow-up just like a cold email, even though it's just expanding and continuing the thread of what I'm talking about.
Totally. I think another good follow-up is a video, right? Like just following up with a video, quick 30 seconds. Hey, wanted to put a face to the name here. Here's why I'm reaching out, and personalize it there. Or even a voice note. Like if you sent an email, maybe send a voice note on LinkedIn. I saw someone asked on multiple channels or which channels.
Yeah.
I would say like the three touch points of, okay, you sent out your email. Now you're going to LinkedIn. You're going to send them a message on LinkedIn or maybe even a voice note referencing what you sent in email. Okay. Now you give them a call, you leave a voicemail and do it in a three-way touch has been super beneficial. But I will say LinkedIn is like my SDR's best friends. They are constantly booking meetings through LinkedIn. And I think it's just changing the game essentially.
Yeah. And then Victoria, just a follow-up question on that. The other part of Hannah's question was any feedback or data on the number of touches, like whether personalized or not personalized, but like touches per account or contact that you run people through across those channels? Is it 10, 15, 20? What would a kind of a sequence like start to finish look like?
So based off outreach data, it's 12 to 15 touches.
Okay, across all of those channels.
I will say though, I've had reps who need only 1 to 2 touches, but average 12 to 15. It just really depends on like your messaging,
Yeah.
also luck. It all
Yeah.
plays.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I'll note is like that's across all channels. With email in particular, the way that I'm seeing it play out, particularly related to getting marked as spam and opt out, are like 3 to 5 in any given like series of outreaches. And so if I reach out to Victoria 5 times over email and she hasn't responded yet, I should probably cool it because she's going to mark me as spam if I continue to send her emails in the next like 30-day window. And so like putting that contact on ice, one of the things I'm a big fan of, particularly with like tier 1 accounts, is looking at the entire buying committee, because like the data right now, okay, obviously I think this is a little bit of an outdated stat, but I think Challenger put the buying committee at 5 people. I think now it's 11. There's something ridiculous. We apparently need an entire committee to decide what color shirt we're going to wear today. But the reality is if you're only reaching out to one person, you're only reaching out to a very small percentage of who's actually going to make the decision about whatever it is. And so one of the things that I've found works really well, this is just like a tactical thing, is like linking the threads together. So let's say I reached out to Victoria 5 times and I'm like, okay, Victoria's going to ban me from ever emailing this company again if I email her again. And so instead, in my last note, I might say, hey, Victoria, I realize I've been blowing you up. Would Matt be a better person to talk to about this? We usually work in the day-to-day with sales development, but understand RevOps can also own tooling. And then when I reach out to you, Matt, I can say, hey, Matt, did Victoria forward you my note by chance? And then I can lean into the same personalization triggers that I had before just to try to kickstart a conversation again.
Really good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And we had another question before we move on to the last example of personalization that we have in here. So from Chris, he was asking about looking at the email header to determine if you actually open or not open cold emails that you get, and then what sort of headers will trigger you to open or maybe reply.
Ooh, I can answer this. Yes, 100%. If the email subject line is something short but sweet and catches my attention, I'll for sure open it. One thing that some of my SDRs used to do when they send out videos, and it sounds a little creepy, but bear with me, they would make like the subject line like Will, comma, video for you, or like I sent you a video or something like that. And we almost had like an 80% like open rate. Like people are like, open that. But if it's something like basic, like conversational AI, like that's going to get deleted. Yeah. That's just my opinion based on what I've seen.
Yeah. And I can think of some examples too. I remember it was last year I got a really good outbound email from a rep at ClickUp. And it was in September, October timeframe, because I was just at Inbound and I had posted something to LinkedIn about how Dharmesh brought up something about loving dad jokes and how I too love dad jokes. And anyone who gets emails from RevOps Co-op knows that every email has some corny dad joke in it. And so this rep from ClickUp, the subject line was like dad joke incoming. And I was like, I got to open that. What do you mean?
Done deal.
Yeah, exactly. So like I opened it. She made a joke. She referenced like my LinkedIn post. And I respond, like, I didn't book a meeting with this person, but I responded and I was like, hey, great job. I'm a happy Notion customer right now, not interested in looking at anything else, but I just got to give you kudos. So those are the things, right? Where I don't even know, right? The post would have been top of my LinkedIn, right? So it's not like she spent hours researching, right? But did a really good job of the personal element, the email hooked me in. It was short and sweet. Just again, one good example there.
Yeah. For anyone listening, any email subject line that says dad joke, to me, I'm 100% opening it.
Yeah. I want to see what
Mostly, I want more dad jokes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've got let's go over this last example that we have here. So we'll maybe start with you on this one's out to Josh with the subject of expansion priority. So give us the rundown on this one.
Yeah, so this was another submitted one. So they took in the subject line, I think the personalization aspect, which is expanding into EMEA, and turned it into the subject. Back to that note, like how do you catch their attention, catch their eye? I'm trying to think if the other piece that they brought in was the product in the region, but there's a lot of questions in here. I'm curious, like, how would this land with you, Victoria?
First of all, there's a lot of eyes. Like all I see when I read this is I see this, I read this, I know XYZ, and you want to make it about you, right? You want to say, hi, Josh, saw you're expanding in EMEA. I would take out the rest and just like, how would you see, like, how are you looking to ramp up the team in a quick and efficient way? I would take out the second part, or email coaching technology. What is the email coaching technology? Just get straight to it. Lavender helps the sales teams over at X to ramp by X%. Is this interesting? And leave it at that.
Yeah. I also thought they said that second line is, I know you're looking for this, but then you're asking me if this is correct. It's like, I don't know, like you just told me, so I guess it is, right? But yeah, I saw
it's a funny
when I
double
first
tone.
looked at this, I was like, a lot of questions that are in here. I thought back to what you mentioned earlier, Will, about being overwhelmed in that case of, oh my gosh, like I just went from one paragraph to the next, and now I'm trying to think of like an answer to the next question that you're asking me.
A fun data point. Oh, go ahead.
I said it's giving me anxiety, this email.
I think a fun like data point just to share on the CTA is obviously fewer is better, but that second one, are you the best person to speak to about this, is way more effective from a data perspective than is this interesting? Is this interesting? That interest-based CTA that we've come to know and love is actually waning in its effectiveness. It's become pattern. And so as we think about how we write emails over time, we have to consistently adjust and get different in how we approach these things. Back to Victoria's point earlier, send a picture of a husky, do something that stands out, do something different. This pattern interrupts, it really matters. And I've taken that data point as it's a sign that we need to shift and like move. It's also a sign that maybe our targeting is a little bit off, the notion of asking if there's a better person to talk to. But that also leans into this whole notion of buyer personas and how you have to go after the entire account.
Yeah, it makes sense. Victoria, I'm gonna take that one off the screen since it was giving you the shakes, and let's look at this one instead. So how do you feel about this?
I like the subject line because if you're mentioning our CFO's comments, I'm going to be curious as to what that means. John Collins spoke about the 15 enterprise logos your team landed. Maybe touch on the 15. Like, I don't know if maybe he's mentioned. I don't know if that makes any difference. Sounds like a moving up market might be a focus. Again, like I probably would make this a LinkedIn message as opposed to an email, but that's just my opinion, because then I would probably take it from the LinkedIn, move it over to email and expand a little bit further. But I'd be curious to get your thoughts, Will.
It's not written to me, so I can't necessarily say. But I find it interesting that they pull from John Collins, 15 enterprise logos. I believe that actually came out of an investor report. And so if you're looking at the investor notes and stuff, you'd actually know that the second part is it's also true at the same time because it was referenced as we're also doing this. I review enough of these emails that I know financials at this point. But thinking about that, it's like how do you add a little extra to make it obvious to respond instead of saying sounds like you're moving up market? Either they saw that data point and decided to ask an obvious question, which is not necessarily helpful. You're not necessarily adding value in that case, versus asking a question given the comments about moving up market. Have you found that there's approaches that are working better? Would it be helpful if you were able to drive more from email, something like that. It would probably give Victoria much more context to like back to that point of expanding on it. Yeah, people like to point at Lavender as like shorter is better. And it's yes, but like in what context? You can still be brief and get a lot across.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, at least for me, a lot of times when I get some shorter messages like that, that are, I don't know, like they're asking questions like this, more about call it like your business and like strategy and stuff. It's if I respond, what are you going to try to pitch me? I don't understand what that is from this case right now. So if there's something in here about if I know like why are you sending me this message? You just want my one word answer about whether we are moving up market? Yes, no. But what does it relate to? For all I know, you could be selling like email kind of software to me, or you could be trying to sell me like, I don't know, a bunch of new notebooks for the sales team that's going to need to take notes because we're moving up market. I'm not sure. So yeah, there's no kind of clear connection there for me as I
Yeah,
look at this.
my only response to that is it just doesn't show on this page, and that is your signature line. It's like a giant
Yeah,
billboard that's, hey, here's what
yeah,
we do.
yeah, yeah,
And
that's true.
so you might get an idea from them. You might even get a new website visitor.
Yeah. So we've walked through a couple of examples of personalization, what it is not. So maybe give us at least some last words on this whole notion of what is personalization, Will, and then we can get into, I know we got a couple of other areas on how AI fits into this and some other elements, but talk to this kind of slide here a little bit.
Yeah. So I think of personalization, particularly that first data point, when we talk about going from 20% of template customization to 50%, it's no longer a check the box activity of, okay, let me insert this like bracket at the front end of my email and then slap a pitch on the backside of it. Um, the reality is personalization should be a process by which you gather context to understand this like larger question that is, hey, why are you reaching out to this person? If you can't fundamentally answer that, it's either an enablement problem or like a
Mhm.
maybe not a skill problem, but maybe a will problem, or you're just like trying to hit your activity quota.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, neither way, there's something going on there. So yeah,
Yeah.
you got to understand the why. And so if that is called what personalization is and is not, how should people think about scaling that, right? Because again, we talked a little bit about
Yeah.
like touch points for that you should be building into the sequences for your sales and your sales development team, the different channels that are there, different elements of personalization, the sliding scale. So how does it scale? How should people be thinking of that?
Yeah, so to that first question I have up there, Victoria, what's the ICP, like target like account size for Liveperson right now?
We really do well with anything above maybe 500 employees and
Mm-hmm.
specifically in the digital and contact center space. But again, like we go after more so like enterprise and strategic accounts. So for us, that's our quote unquote strike zone within like financial services or insurance or even healthcare, retail, and so on and so forth. So that's like our bread and butter ICP.
Yeah.
Say in terms of like segmentation, I don't know if we have many sellers on the call or SDRs, but make sure that you're tiering your accounts. And not only that, from those accounts, make sure you're tiering your contacts, right? So like before I mentioned having like your green level contacts of those people who you're going to be super hyper personalized with. The ones in yellow, maybe you can put into a personalized like by persona and vertical sequence. That's how like you would personalize it at scale.
Yeah. Which when I think about the question of should it in segmentation, right? Like some of these accounts, like we shouldn't be trying to scale things, right? Like the top 50 banks in the US, should we really be trying to scale how we have our first impression with those accounts? Or should we be taking the time to actually introduce ourselves to those groups and start conversation? Same thing with your point on like contacts, right? There's your above the line contacts, there's your below the line contacts. The point that I have on like how do you go faster for those folks and like how do you go faster on the more lower tier type accounts, some of that comes back to segmentation, some of that, and I'll talk about that some with AI, but The other piece of it is just like understanding what personalization is. If it's a process of collecting context so that you can answer why you're reaching out, then there's repeatable steps that you can either streamline, speed up, you can pull them into a central hub, say what we're doing at Lavender within our personalization assistant. And so like tech can enable some of these things. But the reality is I think about this notion of scale, and we tend to overemphasize the next slide, which is like the like how do we automate it and scale it? And it's like that's a trap. It's more of a, because like as soon as it's scaled in that sense of it's automated, it's no longer going to be effective because it becomes the noise that we get used to. The last point I had on the last slide was related to how do you track if this is going well? And some SEPs actually have the ability to give you a sense for like your levels of personalization. SalesOft does a great job of this. Although, sorry in advance, man, I'm like dragging you back and forth between the slides.
No, you're good.
The other thing that we've found to be really helpful for teams is we show them a level of like how much time sales reps are spending actually writing the message. And it becomes like an enablement superpower to be looking at, let's say, what happens after they get a reply and being like, the amount of time it takes you to respond compared to your peers is like 2x. It's like immediate coaching moment to be like, hey, what's going on? Why is this taking so long? And the reality is coaching's an awkward topic. Everybody expects to know how to rate. But because you have that data and you can be like, hey, this is just objective. Like you're taking too long. Be like, here's why. Right? You get answers really fast. So to this point on should you be leaning on AI, what does that mean? I wanted to offer a framework for folks that are here to look at their TAM and understand where AI can be applied and how it can be applied differently. Because I think there's a lot of noise right now around this concept of AI SDR. And then you get like the LinkedIn sort of bubble of, AI SDRs are dead. And those companies are growing pretty fast. So there's something there. They also have a lot of churn. So there's also something missing. But thinking about the different types of products and tools in this world and giving you a strategic framework to understand where to apply them, as opposed to thinking about it as how do I just, I've got a hammer and I'm going to smack it. It's a little bit more nuanced than that because you've got amazing tools that are focused on enrichment and like custom research workflows. Groups like Copy and Clay are definitely leading the pack on this, but you can use those things as you like understand, I've got a lot of interesting data points on, say, Liveperson to reach out. Maybe they become a tier one, but let's say another group that's a little bit smaller, not a publicly traded company, they become a tier two and they have the same kind of data points. The other cool piece in this like workflow is a lot of folks out there, imagine are using a tool like 6sense or a Warmly or like Bombora, these intent tools. You can use that to re-tier and rescore in the background as you're seeing these data points come up. And so the question then becomes like, where do you prioritize the seller time versus where do you prioritize like the AI time? And what does that look like from less automation to more automation? It could also be pointed as more AI enablement versus more AI automation, in the sense of I was writing an email to a chief commercial officer at a publicly traded company last night. I was using our own product, of course, but I'm employing Lavender's AI agent to go search the financial reports and give me answers related to very specific questions that I was then able to use to hone and craft my message. Now, on the flip side, there's only like one particular trigger and like one thing that's like driving it. Maybe it's like the hiring email, right? AI can automate that workflow, particularly to like a secondary persona within that type of organization. And so it's a more repeatable, automatable workflow, just like inbound. I think of inbound as an automatable workflow. Salesforce just released a AI SDR that's only focused on inbound, right? And the reason they're able to do that is because they're reaching out and they're asking you questions about your product. So you just feed their AI bot like information about your product and it can answer it to get them into a meeting. The piece that's missing from a lot of these tools and a lot of these systems to date is this like understanding layer. So they're not really learning on the back end. And so one of the things that I think about in this is you can't scale, you can't automate what you don't understand. And so looking across your content, looking across your personas, those trigger events that work really well, right? Like we saw the hiring trigger was much more impactful than say all those personalization pieces. A lot of the AI SDR tools that are out there in the space today, they don't take the time to do that feedback loop to understand that piece. And so that's where you see a lot of this resentment come up in the market related to these toolings. But the reality is like those are workflows that can be automated and can be pulled off of a seller's plate. And you could probably do it between a Clay and say like your SCP, where you're creating a hyper segmented list based off of enrichments and running some outbound campaigns through an outreach, through a sales loft, and then saving your sellers highly valuable time to have a more enhanced one-to-one experience with these buying groups.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess Victoria, some of the stuff on this framework slide and the slide that we showed before, I guess how does that maybe compare, resonate with you and how you think and how you do at Liveperson apply AI and technology in different elements of the kind of the sales development process?
Yeah, I think, listen, like AI is super important at making your reps and your sellers more efficient. I personally, I'm shocked. I didn't know that Salesforce did that, where they have automated inbound SDR. That's sick.
Just rolled
However,
out.
wow, that's so cool. I want to test it out. However, I would say they always talk about, is AI going to replace your SDRs or sellers? No, but it's going to replace the SDRs or sellers that aren't leveraging it to become more efficient, right? Like you can tell between an email that sounds like a bot wrote it or between an email that sounds like a human wrote it or the bot and human together, right? So just like putting out your framework, putting out your thoughts on something and leveraging the tools that are given to you. Hopefully the sellers on the call work at a company where they're given tools to help them succeed. Put that through and like work with the AI to make sure that you're writing the best that you can or doing the work that you can and using that for research too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think we actually we had a separate digital event. It was last week or the week before, and this topic of I think outbound and is outbound dead, right? It came up, like you said, a lot of times LinkedIn, the echo chamber, right? We can hear all these things that people are shouting. And I gave the example of look back to back in the day, right? We were talking about Glengarry Glen Ross and how they're coming out with a Broadway rendition of that now, right? And you think back to that movie, right? It was just phones, right? Like back in the day, like everyone was just dialing for dollars, literally. Today, right, with all the advancements that we have in technology, have people stopped calling, cold calling people? Like, no, like the technology has not replaced like that element of the sales process. Like it's made it a lot more efficient, right? Like you got power dialers, you can like automatically leave voicemails now. Like you got all this new stuff. It still takes a person to do all that work. And I think like here too, the whole notion of AI assist over AI replacement, 100% true and correct. That's just like where we're going. So I don't think any of this like technology is going to be replacing people anytime soon. I think, like you said, it's going to be replacing the things that people shouldn't be doing, right? So that they can do more of the valuable things that only a person can do.
Right.
So yeah, in the last, we got a couple of minutes here. So maybe Victoria, start with you. Like any last closing remarks, like anything that you want to leave folks with as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think honestly, like I would just close with what I honestly just said, right? Don't get scared of the whole hype around, oh, is AI going to take my job? Is AI going to replace me? It's not. It's just going to make you more efficient. And I think more people should leverage tools that are going to help them and not hurt them in the long run. And hopefully the people on the call are working for companies where you're given the tools to help you become more successful. So I would just say take advantage of what's given to you and really just continue. And I know this is going to sound really cliche, but just continue to learn, continue to research, continue to see what's out there on LinkedIn, learn from other people. And I think that that's what helped me with my career. And I think that's what's really valuable for as the sales game is always changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Don't, it's easy, especially with AI stuff, right? To feel, I don't know, threatened or stuff, right? By these new things that are popping up that are like you don't have experience with or you don't necessarily know. But yeah, have that kind of natural curiosity for learning how to use them, right? To do your job better, more effectively. I think that'll only serve you going forward. And Will, what about you? Any last closing remarks for folks?
Yeah, I think with any space that's getting, super noisy, there's always the inclination to just dismiss things on a carte blanche approach. The reality is, like, as we were walking through in that framework, it's a little bit more nuanced. Just it's a little bit more nuanced to just say personalization is a good thing versus a bad thing. I think about, we have another customer of ours where we were pulling a personalization report for them because SalesLoft pulls that data already, and we were just like showing it to them, just like pulling the data out of their SCP and like putting it in front of them, being like, yeah, if you look at personalization as a like blanket statement, like you just have to realize though there's a large majority of your
Yeah.
personalized emails that aren't actually what you think they are. And yeah, to this point of can't scale what you don't understand, like you have to be trying to dig deeper into these data points in order to figure out like how you can crack the code to make these things work better. And a lot of times, like the current understanding is just not deep enough to get you there. But just for the RevOps folks out there,
Yeah,
give them a
no, makes sense. It's like saying, hey, we got to go out and scale sales. Like, how do we sell more? Right? Sure, right? And say the equivalent would be like, hey, we got to go out and personalize. Like, how do we personalize more? And so there's different elements, there's varying degrees, right? Things to do and not do, and just that alone is not going to get you there. So yeah, it makes sense. Dive into the weeds, dive into the details. Victoria and Will, thank you very much for dropping some knowledge on all things personalization, sales development, sales operations today. Very much appreciate it. For everybody who is still on, once you exit the Zoom, you'll be prompted to take a quick 2-question survey, just feedback on the session today. If you can please fill that out, that would be awesome. We take all of our feedback very seriously. And then the recording and a full write-up will get up on our website in the next week to 2 weeks. So you'll be able to find this there and you won't lose access to that at all. But with that, I'll let you all run. Have a good rest of your Wednesday, everybody, and we'll see you on the flip side. So take care.
awesome. Thanks,
Bye.
Matt. Thanks, Victoria.
See you, everybody.